The phenomenon of isolation. Would you want to leave? A space physician's diary. Isolation Day 85. An audio article. Asgardian test researcher, space physician Ksenia Orlova continues to explore and learn about herself in the Sirius 23, the 365-day isolation experiment. The next pages of her diary tell about why she may not want to leave the containment facility when the isolation ends, and how training on an exercise bike becomes an effective psychotherapy. Isolation Day 85. My morning commenced with the routine task of drawing blood for physiological methods. Yesterday afternoon, I signed 90 test tubes for the next 3 days, 2 people per day. It took about 2 hours to prepare. At the same time, I voluntarily refused the help of Rustam, test researcher Rustam Zaripov, on the task. Each person signs in their own way, with their own handwriting, and applies their own logic. But in such processes, as practice has shown, uniformity is better. When everything is signed with one hand, it is arranged as needed for ease of use, according to a certain scheme. And in general, I like this activity. I am in my own zone, I'm alone in a medical module, I clearly know what else needs to be done or collected, etc. In the background, as always, there is music from the laptop. Gradually, I gave up listening to fashionable radio stations. In the quietude of my surroundings, I found myself reflecting on the overwhelming presence of external stimuli, particularly the relentless onslaught of advertisements and marketing messages. I don't want to know anything about it after leaving isolation. You no longer want to immerse yourself in an environment where it all screams at you from every corner, looks at you from every billboard, imposing, distracting, tempting. Probably, I began to perceive the walls of the ground experimental complex as a protective shell, protecting me from an oversaturation with everything and by everyone. I also heard similar things in conversations from other guys. Perhaps by the end of the isolation, some will not even want to leave. I recall cases from our past isolation experiments. For example, after 520 days of isolation, the Mars 500 crew was in no hurry to leave the ground experimental complex on the last day, regretting that they would have to miss their usual lunch at the pressurized facility. Back to our business. Special conditions were prescribed for physiological methods for drawing blood. I even printed out the main ones and pasted them on the table in the medical module. 10 minutes before the procedure, I took a reusable plastic cup. I put several ice cubes in it, cutting them out of a special bag with scissors. I placed a smaller disposable cup on top of the ice. I lowered vacuum tubes with heparin, an anti-clotting component, into it, and put all of this in the refrigerator. For the next task, using this method, as we learned from practice, we need one more assistant, in addition to my irreplaceable chief assistant, Rustam. When I take blood, Rustam rearranges and turns over the filled tubes. About halfway through the process, which consists of filling 15 tubes per person, those for serum run out, and we ask a third person to take the heparin tubes out of the refrigerator, fill them, and immediately give them back to the second assistant. He must sign the exact time of blood collection on a special moisture-proof bag, then put everything back in the refrigerator until the whole procedure is completed. Such a complex method is needed for maximum fixation of living cells in venous blood for subsequent research. The refrigerator is located at the entrance to the module, and we draw blood on the couch at the end of the module. It turned out to be difficult to run back and forth in gloves treated with antiseptic. Fortunately, at this time, there is always someone who is free from their methods and can help. Of course, in extreme situations, even one person can do everything. But the benefits of teamwork are felt. Many processes are accelerated several times faster when we act together. Kasyusha Shishanina carries out an additional physiological method, collecting hair samples. From different parts of the head, she carefully cuts out bundles of about 10 hairs at the root, cuts off the extra long part, and places the root part, the one that has grown since the last collection, in test tubes. This is necessary for a more accurate analysis of certain types of microelements and vitamins. After handing over and removing all the biomaterials, I begin training. On this day, it is my favorite one, an exercise bike. I found an important psychological aspect in it. I really want to improve my performance, and I like this kind of physical activity more than running. This means that you should make every effort, not give yourself any concessions, and persevere in doing what the managers have prescribed. An intense microcycle implies almost the limit of your capabilities, taking into account the power indicators from the previous test. First, a gradual warm-up, and then 20 seconds at the maximum, 10 seconds for the recovery, and so on about 10 times. You need to overcome yourself if you want to improve your results. If a person cannot cope, she can report this and ask the managers to make the protocol easier. Or maybe you just don't squeeze out what's written on the screen if your strength doesn't allow it. It all depends on the test researchers themselves. There is no coach who constantly stands over and pushes on. And we are not striving to join the Olympic team. Each test researcher conducts training independently at his or her own responsibility. The help of an assistant is required only at the beginning to start the equipment, and then no one is watching. The COSMED unit does not record your indicators other than the pulse sensor. Full data is recorded during tests and on the passive track, but here you are left to your own devices, and only you decide what you want at this moment. I won't hide the fact that spinning the capacity takeoff at its maximum performance is not easy. In such cases, what helps me is anger. I turn on some heavy music in the spirit of the disturbed repertoire and force myself into a state of aggression during training, directed at myself. The motivation here is as follows. If I had the strength to eat too much and not take care of my physical fitness for a long time, then I will have the strength to overcome this. At these moments, I mentally swear at myself. How could I let everything take its course, justifying myself with the fashionable self-acceptance? Around the 7th peak of the takeoff, it gets really hard. It is becoming painful. Leg muscles cramp. I turn up the music louder and, gritting my teeth, make an extra effort to make it easier to make it through the remaining seconds. During the test, I found out that the muscles were not damaged. The next day, I did not feel any pain. This means that there is still a reserve, and you can strain yourself to a noticeable limit. Perhaps the cardiac sensor helps you to limit yourself based on your heart rate. An additional psychological aspect that I identified is the following one. Such work on oneself leads to the fact that there is no longer a need to throw aggression outward, to take it out on others. In the morning, I went to training, dispersed the blood, energy, pain, turned my attention to myself, and I already know that some of the extra emotions have been released. Naturally, we are all human, and it is common for everyone to boil or get mad for different reasons in different situations. But I think that it's better for me to deal with myself like this than to express something to someone. After this kind of psychotherapy, the feeling is wonderful. Yes, for the first 5 minutes, it's hard to walk on straight legs due to clogged quadriceps, thigh muscles. But thanks to this, you feel that the training was successful and definitely not in vain. After lunch, I record all the foods I ate on a food and fluid intake questionnaire. 3 days before the basic metabolism method, it is necessary to start maintaining such a questionnaire for the managers, in addition to our regular nutrition diaries. I'm glad that some of the information from the diary, for example, the product's name and weight, can be simply copied. A little later, it's time for another questionnaire, this time on the greenhouse. It includes only 5 questions, but with 5 answer options. This is an additional psychological method that allows you to evaluate the positive effect of living plants in isolation on tested researchers. We fill out this questionnaire every 2 weeks. As night fell, Rustum, using the Morpheus method, placed individual cardiosleep, ballistocardiography in all the cabins, which is a metal plate that is placed under the test researcher's mattress. The device records motor activity during sleep. Such a study is carried out regularly once a month. A power sensor is connected to the plate through wires, which must be turned on before falling asleep and turned off immediately upon waking up in the morning. You don't feel the presence of the plate in any way, but the activated sensor on the wires blinks every second with a bright yellow light, and I try to place it on the floor so that it doesn't interfere with falling asleep. Join Asgardia, the first space nation, today.